Hello and welcome. This is Latitude at Frontline. It is 24 hours after the US attacked three of Iran's most prominent underground nuclear sites with bunker busters on June 22nd. With this, President Donald Trump has finally joined Israel's war against Iran. He has now turned it into America's war. Iran has retaliated against targets in Israel so far, saying that a big red line has been crossed. Iran has also said it will exercise its right to self-defense. What happens next? Is Iran going to attack US targets in the Gulf region, in that whole West Asian region? Or will it surrender to the US as President Trump has demanded? What are the consequences for the West Asian region and beyond? Does India's stand on this latest conflict tell us about India's standing in the world? I will be discussing all this with my guest today, Mr. Singh, India's former ambassador to Iran from 2003 to 2005, also India's ambassador to the United Arab Emirates, and former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador Singh, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Mr. Singh, so this moment that the world had long feared and long anticipated as well has finally come to pass. The US has used its B-2 bombers to drop bunker busters on Iran's nuclear facilities. It has fired Tomahawk missiles at these same facilities. Iran has hit back with missiles at Israel. Now the US is signaling that these strikes were limited and they were restricted in scope, and that they have achieved their goal. And that the next thing for Iran is to come to the table. Iran has said that it never left the table, that it was Israel and the US that have attacked it before the talks could proceed, and that now the US attacks need a response. So how do you see this unfolding? What is going to happen next?
You see, we have to look at the objectives of different countries involved in this. Yesterday, the president of Israel was giving an interview to BBC. And when he was asked that now that the primary objective of destroying or damaging the Iranian nuclear program is over, and the Americans have participated, are you ready for a ceasefire? He immediately dodged it. He said, no, there is still a lot of missiles that are available with Iran, and we have to go to all those missile sites. So very clearly, the Israeli objective was partly the nuclear program, probably the first objective, but the main objective is regime change. They made no bones about it, and they think Americans have been drawn into it. The best case scenario for them is if Iran attacks American facilities and gets into a direct combat with America, because then they think Americans will cause so much damage, including probably killing the supreme leader or some of the other top leadership, that regime change may become possible. They convince themselves that the average Iranian is opposed to the regime. And I think that is a serious mistake because they don't understand the Iranian civilization. It's a very ancient civilization. They dominated the entire region in 550 BC when the Achaemenid Empire was formed. Their influence went exactly where it was now, what is called the Shia Crescent, all the way to Greece. In fact, even Turkey was included. Now, at the moment, Turkey was not part of the thing. So to assume that they will just give up, one is Shia faith, which depends on martyrdom. Martyrdom is ingrown into it. And the second thing is their pride in their civilization. So the minute Iran is attacked, the country, the nation will line up behind the leadership, however much they despise them.
As it is already done, I think.
Yeah, because they see it as an attack on their civilization, on their faith, on their sense of history. And that is what is happening. So Israel is deluding themselves. They think, people are going to rise up and overthrow the regime. So what are the objectives? What are the American objectives? I think that is, so far Iranians, we must remember one thing, that Iranians can be emotional, but when they take a decision, they are calculating. There's a phrase which is used, which is inherent to the Shia faith, which is called taqiyya, which is dissimulation. That is part, it was allowed because when Shias were persecuted, you were allowed to even lie about your faith as long as it was necessary for survival. And this dissimulation is very intrinsic to the way Iran approaches subjects. So at the moment, they understand that this is what Israel wants. That's why they've not attacked the Americans. They will they will do an analysis to see how much damage has been caused. The attack on Natanz and on Isfahan is just a bogus thing. They were not bunker busters. They've fired missiles from a submarine, but those were already emptied out. Israelis had already attacked them. IAEA said that at Natanz, the 400 plus kilograms of enriched uranium enriched to 60%, was at Natanz. But very clearly, the Iranians have removed that. And that's what they're saying, that we managed to empty out these places. Now, as far as Fordow is concerned, there is a question mark. Did it succeed? Did it not succeed? There are contradictory reports coming. So you're getting one extreme view from Iran, that there's zero damage. And you're getting the other extreme view from Trump, it's completely demolished. So probably the truth is in between.
There's also some report from the IAEA that there is no radiation over these sites. So it could mean that they've not really achieved the goal of destruction.
Which means Natanz didn't have those 400 kilograms of enriched uranium, which Iranians claim they have moved elsewhere. Now, that is the uranium they need to very quickly turn into weapons. Because from 60% to 90% is a fairly quick progress. Now, if they move that, they might even have moved some of the latest version of the equipment for enriching uranium, which might have been shifted somewhere else. Then you got complications with North Vietnam saying, oh, we will give nuclear weapons to them. Now, you don't even know if Iran has produced a weapon or somebody else has given it. So, in a sense, the non-proliferation regime is ready to now completely get disrupted because Iran has a justification, a moral justification for going that way. Because they'll say, look at North Korea. They've continued to possess weapons and nobody dared touch them. And Trump, in fact, went and, tried befriending them, walked into North Korea, stepped into North Korea across the line of the
demilitarized line.
A demilitarized zone. Yeah. So if that is the way you treat a country which has got nuclear weapons, then obviously Iran is justified in possessing those weapons. Because otherwise you come and dump bunker busters on them. So what is the precedent that you're setting? Because the negotiations were still on. The talks were to be, the fifth round of talks were on the 15th of June. And the Israelis go and attack on the 13th. And to assume the Americans didn't know or the Americans were not in the picture, I think would be probably a mistake. I think they were working side by side. Americans playing the good cops, engaging, talking, but they knew that their demand of Iran completely packing up their nuclear enrichment program and therefore having zero enrichment was not acceptable to Iran. And I think once they faced that, they kind of silently gave the green light to Israel.
So then you're saying two things. One is that Iran will now double down on its nuclear weaponization. And two, that because it wants to cut Israel out of the equation, it might actually decide that talks with the US are probably in its interests, if I'm right.
Not at the moment. I think at the moment they are in a position to punish Israel more. There's a lot of censorship. We are not being told how much damage is being done to the Haifa port, but there are reports coming in that the missiles are still, Iranian missiles are still going through the Iron Dome and hitting Israeli cities. And they're basically two cities, Tel Aviv and Haifa, the port. And being a small country, it's easier to target than Iran, which is a huge country with multiple cities and huge vacant ground, mountains. So it's much more difficult to target. So Israel may have got itself into a corner. If they want a regime change, I think Iranians would want a regime change in Israel. And I think they're also taking a revenge for what Israel has done in Gaza, what they've done against Hezbollah. So they've got an opportunity now. And nobody is telling them to stop firing missiles. They're taking revenge. So you are the ones who started it. So we are firing back. So they'll cause as much damage as possible till the Israeli. Now, what will Israel now do? They went to the Americans to say, take out their nuclear thing. So either they sue for peace they stop firing them, which means they realize that they cannot decapitate the rest of the military capacity of Iran, and therefore they'll have to live with it. Then the Americans can sit down, but Americans can only talk to them if they are willing to at least give a face saver on the nuclear side, which means there's been talk of having a, a new facility, enrichment facility, which is a joint facility, private sector, or maybe the contested islands which Iran occupies, which is claimed by UAE, and probably the Gulf countries could participate in it. There could be multiple solutions, but those come later. But at the moment, I think Iran would require a face saver. They are not going to, otherwise, they're willing for the long haul.
So, this face saver, as you're saying, is not going to come about for some time because they first want to teach Israel a lesson. But that also plays into Israel's hands, isn't it? So that, it can actually keep this appeal up to the US and drag the US further into a war, into its war with Iran. And so this could be protracted then.
I think Trump has a problem. You see, his base is already split.
Yeah.
You're already seeing dissension within the Republican Party and the MAGA groups. And his two strong MAGA supporters, they've been opposing it. They said, look, we said we will not enter wars. One-time hitting of nuclear facilities is fine. But if before Iranians attack American facilities, America re-enters it, Trump will find it very difficult to justify domestically. The dissensions will grow. They'll say, why are you going in a second time? You've gone and done what you said you had to do. Now you're provoking Iran. Now you're looking for a war. So it'll be very difficult to market it domestically. I don't see. So I think Iranians may be smart enough to realize that let's not target American facilities directly. In any case, Americans have removed, they're emptying out their bases in the immediate vicinity of Iran. So there is no, and also Iran would not want to spoil its whatever kind of relationship it has with the GCC countries. Or with Qatar, for instance, its large gas field, which the Israelis bombed at the Iranian end, is shared with Qatar. And that's why Qatar was very unhappy. It's a common gas field. It's the largest gas field in the world. It stretches literally from Qatar all the way to Iran. So they don't want to do that. Bahrain, in any case, has majority Shia population.
Yeah, it has a Shia population.
So normally they would like to, and it's only a Sunni ruling family, but the bulk of the population is Shia. So they won't attack the population there. If anything, they may attack the American base, but Americans would have moved their ships out. I don't think they'll be there. So the Iranians may just play along and therefore decide, let's punish Israel. And that increases American concerns and they can't re-enter again. So let's see where it goes from here.
Right. You spoke about regime change, but some people are also saying that the objective is not regime change, but also regime collapse, something similar to what has happened in Syria, where you can just install a puppet regime and let it play out in the way that it does in chaos, and so that you completely destroy the structures and the institutions and so on. But Iran, as you pointed out, is a civilization state. It's hardly Syria. And the supreme leader of Iran, we are hearing from reports from Iran that the supreme leader, Ali Hussein Khamenei, has already appointed successors to all the important posts, including he has appointed his own successor. So obviously the Iranians also fear that, they might be, that regime change is a possibility, particularly as Israel seems to have penetrated Iran in many ways. It's got, the first attacks showed that it had spies all across Iran. So if it does happen, what would it look like? Who would replace this theocracy? Iran has a very deep batting order, to borrow a cricketing term. So what would it look like? Who are the likely contenders post theocracy if it were to come to that?
Look, the supreme leader has not nominated his successor. What he's done is he's put up three names for consideration by an organization called the Assembly of Experts. These are 88 clerics who are elected. They used to be elected when I was there for 4 years. Now they're elected for 8 years. They were elected last year. So they'll be there till 2032. Those three names will be before the Assembly of Experts. There'll be an interim arrangement where the president and somebody else, etc., looks after governance till the Assembly of Experts picks up one out of those three names. So he's cleared a line of succession, but he is using an institutional arrangement for that. He's now, for instance, his son was being named as a possible successor. It is believed now he's not put his son's name in the three. So, it'll be very difficult. And secondly, the principal difference, say, between Saddam Hussein and this place is Saddam was ruling a Shia majority country. He's a Sunni dictator ruling a Shia majority country. Assad in Syria was a Shia minority ruling a Sunni majority country. Iran doesn't have any such problem. And because it's an alliance between the military authority and the Shia clerics, they have their reach all the way to the village. So the clerical approach is all the way to the village. It's like a huge political party, and also there's limited democracy. They have elections, there's an elected president. They allow people to let off steam. That's diminished over the last 6, 8, 10 years. But it used to be there very much. You allowed a degree of you selected the final candidates, but then allowed a free race between them. And the clerics didn't always get the president they wanted. They probably got a less desirable president than somebody else. So they were allowing this. So it's not that easy to topple them, because you've also got the IRGC. You've got other structures, paramilitary forces, which go all the way down to the village level. So it's a whole power structure, which will be very difficult to overturn. And immediately you're not going to end. We've seen Americans have failed in bringing really liberal democracy in Iraq. They definitely have failed in Afghanistan. So change of regime does not always, or Libya, it does not get you. I think that's a lesson Americans have learned, and that's what they're telling Trump. I don't think Trump will go further into this regime change nonsense. This is just Israelis. But Iranians also know that if they can keep up the attack on Israel, the pressure will build up within Israel of changing Netanyahu. And elections should be held there. And he's not that popular. He got popular once these attacks took place. But if the killings go on and the missiles keep firing, I think the opinion will change in Israel itself. They'll say, let's get a more liberal government. So you need a regime change definitely in Israel too. Otherwise, the way they are going about it, it just can't go on.
But there's also the view that this conflict with Iran and the US strike, however limited that was, and also the uncertainty about the future, actually empowers Netanyahu to now go ahead and do what he wants in Gaza, because the attention of the world is now drawn to Iran. So his whole plan in Gaza is now going to gather steam, and he's just going to go ahead and crush Gaza. Is that something?
How do you crush Gaza when, two missiles fired from Iran, everybody is rushing to the bunkers. They're going into the underground. So the population is getting sick and tired of it. Your airport is shut. Your port is disrupted. They're not letting it be known, but I'm sure they're having a problem. And then Iranians have held out the final threat, which is the nuclear plant that Iran has. They said now that is being targeted because you targeted our nuclear facilities. If they get a missile into that plant, look at the contamination that follows, because you'll have a nuclear cloud, which will float all over the region. So that is a threat they're holding out. I think Israelis are also bluffing. They're just seeing at the moment to see how threatened the Iranians are feeling, how badly are they hurt. But if they realize, I'm sure they'll do an assessment that the nuclear assets that they had are damaged but not completely destroyed, and that they can revive their program, because after all, ultimately, it's the knowledge that their scientists have. You can't kill all 100% of their scientists. And knowledge is there, and it's not rocket science. If it's a relatively easy process. People have shown it, enrichment process on the net, on the internet, how it is done.
Yeah.
So they may not have the latest machines at the moment, but they'll be able to procure them because Chinese, the Russians, and the Koreans are backing them. They'll be quite happy to quickly resurrect their enrichment program. So I think we are at a very interesting juncture where Israel may have already played most of its cards, and if it is not able to provoke a direct fight between US and Iran, then I think Israel may be on the losing side.
Yeah, so Ambassador Singh, you spoke about how some countries have come forward to help um, Iran at the moment, Russia and China. They both are perhaps the only countries that have really strongly condemned the US attack on Iran. Russia's called Washington's move irresponsible, gross violation of international laws, which it is, and that that this is undermining regional and global security. China has also said that it's completely uncalled for. The attack was uncalled for, and it violated eh, all international laws. And it's called on all the parties to, uh, especially Israel, it has called on Israel to cease attacks as soon as possible and begin dialogue and negotiations. But both China and Russia are quite far away. And what can they give Iran besides tea and sympathy? You mentioned nuclear technology, help with the nuclear program. But is that really what they're going to do? Because then they also endanger their own standing as nuclear states in the P5.
No, they'll say if he will not give directly, but once as part of a deal, they'll say that they have a right as signatories to the NPT unless Iran leaves NPT. As signatories to the NPT, they are allowed to have a nuclear program under the supervision of IAEA. The problem was that the Iranians had started enriching to 60%. They had also embedded, like in Fordow, some of their nuclear facilities deep in a mountain. Now that lacked transparency, that reflected lack of trust. So I think Iran will also have to restore that. They can't have these deeply embedded things, but at the same time, they would justify that, look, we had the deeply embedded ones because the US president is captive to the Israeli government. They forced the Americans to come in, whereas the American director of intelligence, she herself said that we have no evidence of Iran moving towards producing a nuclear weapon. Even the IAEA said inspectors have not seen any evidence of Iran moving towards producing a nuclear weapon. But Trump just simply ignored his own director of intelligence. And they definitely ignored what IAEA was saying. Although what Iranians are doing was very close to the dividing line between what is permissible and what is not permissible. But that's Iran for you. And their argument is that if Israel, which is a non signatory to the NPT, can have nuclear weapons and you're not asking them any questions, then where is the nuclear regime? What are we talking about? So that is their moral argument in the Islamic world, and the average person at the street level will agree with them. They'll say if they can have it, if Pakistan can have it, then why can't these guys have it, etc. I used to tell them when I was there, I said, look, don't compare yourself to India because you signed on to the NPT. We did not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they would ignore that. So essentially, they make a moral issue, not a legal issue. Legally, they realize they are not in the right.
So is this also going to start a race to acquire nuclear weapons among other states in the region, say for Saudi or Egypt or other countries? Because now they know that nuclear weapons are like the last frontier of your security. I mean, if you have nuclear weapons, then this kind of attack by Israel or by the US is slightly more difficult. So, do you think it's going to get all the other countries in the region also into a nuclear race?
No, we saw that is what they said about Saddam Hussein, that he tried developing a program. His program was disrupted. Then a fake argument was floated that his program has been revived and he's going to get dangerous weapons. And that is the attack was launched in 2003. But it was also said that if Saddam Hussein had weapons, and then Saddam Hussein apparently said later that he used this argument because he wanted to frighten others. Now, you don't use a bogus argument when you don't have the weapons and you try frightening the other country, they'll come in even more forcibly, which is what the Americans did. So that argument is already there. That can the nuclear weapons save you from the intervention of a foreign power in your domestic affairs? Well, it seems it can, provided you have enough weapons. But if you're at if you're a threshold power, it can be very risky. We saw Saddam Hussein attack, we've seen Iran attacked, but Iran is not finished. So if the aim, that is why that comes in. That's why Israel is desperate that there should be a regime change, because they realize as long as the Islamic regime is there, they will pick up the fragments, they will recover. They, after all, are sitting on huge reserves of oil. And also, they are strategically close to China and Russia, and there is easy connectivity. With Russia, the connectivity is via the Caspian. They just come across, and through Central Asia, Chinese have already been developing connectivity under the Belt and Road Initiative. So they've got railways and roads coming to this area. So the Chinese have an overland connectivity coming through Central Asia. So even though, but now the issue is, what happens if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked? Because the Iranian parliament has passed a resolution. Some reports were there that the Iranian Navy is turning ships around, but that has not been confirmed so far. So I think the Iranians will keep it on the table. They've got the parliament to do it, but their Supreme National Security Council has not taken a decision. They are holding out the threat, because if that is blocked, then global economy is affected. Even in America, the price of oil and consumer will end up paying $5 or $6 a gallon. And that is what will affect Trump's popularity in the country. And the common man will say, what the hell have you gone and done in Iran? But they've not done it as yet, because that will invite American attack again on facilities around, they'll say, after all, they'll have some ships there to block it, but the ships can't be a sustainable answer to blocking.
Yeah.
The only way to block it, they'll threaten the ships with firing missiles at them and say, if you go through this, we will hit you. So then Iranians will have their, launch pads, etc., which Israel is targeting. If the Americans come in, then the targeting becomes more serious. So at the moment, they haven't done it, but they are holding it out. So I think the Americans will also have to think about it. They have to pull the Israelis back and say, enough is enough. Now you stop it at this stage. But so far, we've not seen any evidence. We're just seeing jubilation and Trump is feeling happy. We're not seeing any statesman-like approach from America to say, look, we had to do this much, one-off, we have done it. Now this is the time to sit down and talk. But the American problem is they are not ready with a face saver. And the Iranians will not settle for anything less than a face saver. They're not going to accept that their program is completely demolished, and they're not going to touch the program at all in the future.
I'd like to come to India now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke yesterday to the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and urged immediate de-escalation and for the restoration of peace and stability in the region. But it isn't Iran that's escalated. Shouldn't India be addressing that message really to the Israelis and the US?
Look, there is the relationship between the BJP government and Netanyahu's party is entirely different. It's ideological. It's the old link from Savarkar's time between Zionism and Hindutva. Let's not make any mistakes about it. This is not the normal reaching out to Israel, which was done in 91. I was the director of WANA at that time, and Mr. Dixit was the foreign secretary. Narasimha Rao had come in. I wrote the note, the cabinet note, where we established diplomatic relations. That was a diplomatic outreach, because the whole Arab world had moved on. They were already talking to Israel. Peace process was already on. So we were getting left out of it, and that's why we caught up with it. But that approach, and that's why no prime minister, including Mr. Vajpayee, went to Israel. So we kept up our relationship, but we did not want to cross a certain line. Now that line has been crossed by Prime Minister Modi. So it's not a normal relationship of closeness. I think it's an ideological sort of attraction to each other, which goes beyond normal friendship between warm relations between India and Israel, which were always there. So that is why we started any resolution about Gaza. We were abstaining. We've not come out openly to condemn Israel or the killing of civilians there. So, India had moved away from its neutral stance between Israel and Iran. And Iran knows it. Iran will play along with us. But they know it. They are not stupid. They realize it. So they will talk to the Indian Prime Minister. But what is your locus standi? What is the point coming out with motherhood and apple pie and making general statements? What are you willing to do in this? We don't have leverage. Are you going to tell Israel to stop? They're not going to listen to you. And certainly, why should the Iranians listen to you? And then the Americans are involved. And then the Pakistanis have got an opportunity. And that's what we were discussing earlier. So the fact that Trump is hosting the Chief of the Army Staff, Field Marshal Munir, a few days before all this happens, very clearly this was part of their strategy of weaning Pakistan away, making sure that if this worsens and tomorrow they need the air bases in Pakistan, they might already be using them for espionage and certainly not for the B-2 bombers. But they would already be using Pakistani intelligence, Pakistan as a base. And if they need an overland attack, at some stage they think the regime is crumbling, then Pakistan is critical as a power. But then Pakistan also has a problem. Like India, 15% of the Muslim, their population are Shia. Yeah. So they also cannot go too far off against Iran. So they're also playing a game. They'll play with the Americans. They've done it for decades. So this is a new game. But the embarrassment for India was obvious when Trump invited Prime Minister Modi to come to Washington while Field Marshal Munir is getting feted there and given a lunch. So that itself indicated that there's a geopolitical shift which has occurred in the region. And India is now a part player in it. We are not a major player, we're a part player because we have put everything in the American corner. And that, although we balanced our relations with Russia, we did it with others, but essentially the tilt towards Israel and America was obvious. And that tilt is now costing you because Americans are interested in other approaches. Americans have gone off at a tangent. And that is why Trump and I think Pakistan added insult to injury by nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize 2 days before he hits these, throws the bunker busters at Iran. What kind of a peace prize would he get? But the Pakistanis don't care because we are saying Trump did not mediate. And Pakistanis are nominating him for a Nobel Prize for mediation. So where does that leave India in Trump's mind? So, they managed to create a fissure between you and US, which is not visible yet. But it's not that America is completely on board with you on treating Pakistan a certain way that you want it.
So, you spoke about how India's had to balance all this, and we are now playing a big part really in this whole, in all the happenings in the West Asian region, and of course in other places as well. But isn't there some value to this balancing act, to being neutral? Because definitely it gives you some autonomy of action. In the Ukraine conflict, you saw that India was able to buy its energy supplies, procure its energy supplies from Russia at cheaper rates. So there is some value to neutrality, isn't it?
There is, but then you go back to old non-alignment. Then you stop having special relationship with the US, having multiple joint committees dealing with multiple subjects. That's all right when you have a normal president in the White House. But somebody like Trump, who is completely upending the global trade order, the global security order, America first approach, then that engagement gets disrupted. It's not going to be easy to keep engaged with them. For instance, there's already a move in the US Congress for sanctions against countries which are buying Russian oil, stronger sanctions on Russia. And they mentioned India in the same sentence as Russia and China. Now, if that is going to happen, India is counting on Russian oil if there's disruption from the Gulf. Now, where does that leave you? So it's going to become more difficult to do this balancing as the countries you're balancing between, their differences increase. And some of them are at each other's throat fighting. Then neutrality at that stage has the same kind of negativity which America saw in non-alignment in the 50s and the 60s, where they thought it was immoral for India to be when they were opposing communism. And that always was a stumbling block in Indo-US relations. And we may be headed back towards it as long as Trump is there and as long as war doesn't end and some kind of normalcy doesn't return.
You spoke about India's plan to get, replace whatever we were getting from the Persian Gulf with supplies from Russia. Continue with that, maybe increase that in the coming days. So how bad is it going to be if Iran really blocks the Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, and because considering that so much of our supplies come from there, from Kuwait, from UAE, from Qatar, oil and natural gas passes through that channel. And I was speaking to Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who's your colleague in the Foreign Service, last week on the same platform. And he told me that about 21 million barrels a day of oil come from Iraq and Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, and natural gas from Qatar. So almost 2/3 of our energy requirements come from this passage, and that our reserves will last only 10 days. Mr. Hardeep Puri, our India's petroleum minister, however, is quite sanguine. He says India has diversified its purchases and there's nothing to worry. How optimistic can India be?
I don't know. Mr. Puri would probably know better because he knows which supply lines are open to India. Emirates may be still able to supply something because they have a pipeline to Fujairah, which is outside the Gulf. But then that pressure would be there from China also. The Chinese are also buying from them. Saudis may be able to, the oil fields are all on the Gulf side. I don't know how much they can send, but Iran said they'll disrupt the shipping through the Red Sea also. So even the other entrance point to Suez Canal and all will have disrupted supplies. It would have an effect. Very simply, the price will go up. The Russians are not running a charity. So even if you're buying from Russia, if the global price goes up to 150, the Russians will not be selling at 70. You may get your oil, but there is an international supply line. They may give you a little discount, but they are not going to be running a charitable organization saying, no, we'll keep supplying at $70. So you will have to pay more. Even if you get the oil, the higher amounts that you're paying will start disrupting your economy or government's finances. You can do it for a week, 10 days, 15 days, but you can't do it for 6 months. You can't do it for a longer period. So the long game is very difficult to play. Short term, you can manage it.
Right. And also, of course, we have our great point of strategic interest in Iran is, apart from the oil, is, we've stopped buying oil from Iran some time ago because of the sanctions. But at this point, it is the Chabahar port, which we had hoped to develop and then connect it to the North-South corridor, the transport corridor via Afghanistan into Central Asia. So where does all that go now? Is it goodbye, Chabahar?
No, you see, Chabahar is outside the Gulf. It is outside the Strait of Hormuz, and that is the whole justification of Chabahar. Chabahar is resented by the Pakistanis. What we can ensure that the Israelis won't attack it. I'm sure they will not, because the Chinese investment is also there, investment. So if the Israelis don't attack it, Americans will not attack it. Or at least we hope they won't, unless there are arms coming in that way, etc. So that, at least so far, is safe. If shipping in Indian Ocean is safe, then at least Chabahar can be functional. As long as those two countries don't think arms are being brought in or Chinese are sending arms through Chabahar. So that for the time being will be functional. So a connectivity to Central Asia, etc., may not be fully disrupted at this stage. And if the infrastructure is not destroyed, then whenever normalcy is restored, we can pick up wherever we left off. So immediately, I don't see a danger to Chabahar.
Right, but it's also a country at war. And I mean, how much stability is there going to be for an infrastructure project that takes you through part of the country into, further up into Central Asia or Afghanistan, as the case might be. So there is, I mean, all these things, large infrastructure projects do need a stable government on the other side, a government that is not preoccupied by a bigger war. So in that sense, don't you think that the whole development plan and the plans to develop the railway link and then the road link, all that is going to be a little tough?
No, all projects will get delayed. It doesn't mean they get cancelled, including the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, the IMEC, which is a non-starter at the moment. Till you have normalcy in the area, you can't have Iranian bombs falling on Israel. In fact, Haifa was supposed to be the port where the IMEC ended before you got the connection to Europe. If Haifa is so badly damaged and destroyed, it'll take many months for it to be repaired, to be even functional. And then ultimately, it's about, I think, two rivals are trying to disrupt each other's regime. If Netanyahu stays, you can't have stability because he's not going to stop trying to dominate the region and creating the Trumpian vision of a new order in the Middle East, which started with Abraham Accords. Don't forget, Abraham Accords began with Trump. So he had created normalcy between UAE and Bahrain and Israel. Saudis had not jumped on board. They said, we will not do it until the Palestinian issue is solved. By then, the Palestinian issue got completely out of hand. So Israel knows that if they keep doing what they're doing in Gaza, they are not going to get Abraham Accords. They are not going to get normalcy. Now, I don't think Netanyahu believes in that because, disruption is helping him stay in power. As President Clinton said, as long as he keeps killing other people, he can stay in power because he's got corruption cases. He's not that popular. Extreme right wing is also not happy with him. Some of them have quit. So he's got marginal support. He is hoping that if he could have a change of regime in Iran, then he will be seen as emperor of Israel for all times to come. His popularity will go up in that country because a major threat to Israel would be over. Then he can trample Gaza. He can do what? As long as Iran is there, he can't go around trampling anyone. Because the Saudis are not on board. Even the Turks will not be on board. So whatever little order has been created in Syria and so on and so forth can get disrupted very rapidly. It looks stable that you're getting a new order which is pro-Israel, which is pro-West, but that can get disrupted very quickly.
But Prime Minister Netanyahu has also managed to hang on for 2 years. In fact, he deflected a huge move to dislodge him back in 23 just by the simple act of war in Gaza. And, if Iran keeps up the attacks on Israel, rather than regime change in Israel, which you spoke about, it could actually be Netanyahu actually entrenching himself more and more.
Not if the
Because
damage
war really consolidates a nation, as
no, but you see, if the destruction goes on and you can't see any benefit in it.
Yeah.
In Gaza, you would say, okay, we are killing Hamas, we finished Hamas. But if you caused all the damage you could cause by air attacks in Iran, you don't have your land forces going in there. So you're not able to enter Iran. Your military can't enter there. Now, unless you enter Tehran and go and occupy Tehran and say that we have overthrown the government is not going to get overthrown. So then the damage caused, and it's a small country, cannot take, its economy cannot take this kind of damage beyond a stage. How much will the Americans, even their interceptor missiles, they were running very low on them. And also Iranians, they're saying each missile they're firing may be worth $20,000. the counter missile that Israel is firing is worth a few $1 million. So the interceptors are bleeding them. Some are saying it's costing them $250 million a day. So how many days can you sustain it? And Iran has shown that they have enough missiles tucked away. Their capability, Israel may have taken off quite a few, say 50% of their launchers, but they still have enough launchers. They'll get launchers. There are reports of Chinese planes landing in Iran. So the Chinese may be providing more. The Iranians may be providing more. Iranians can do it through the Caspian overland, over water, coming directly into Iran. All they need to supply are launchers. And if enough missiles are there, and Iran is claiming they even have missile production facilities which are underground. Now, we don't know how much of that is true, how much of that is make-believe, but so far they've been able to up the ante by going to hypersonic missiles, missiles which cannot be intercepted by the Iron Dome and by the American systems there. Theoretically, they can even attack the American ships which are there in the Mediterranean. If you can hit Haifa, you can also hit an American vessel which is 5 kilometers further up in the Mediterranean. So, but they haven't done that because they realize if they bring down an American ship, then the American public opinion will turn and enable Trump to come back right in. Ideally, if I understand the Iranian mind, Iranians will use taqiyya. They'll dissimulate. They'll ignore America for the time being. They'll just lump it what Americans have done. They will claim the damage is limited. They've just basically bombed two facilities which were already empty and partly bombed, which is correct. Natanz and if the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium couldn't be taken out, then it was pointless bombing Natanz. So that was the only thing which the Iranians had not bombed, Israelis had not bombed. Now, if even the Fordow facility is only damaged outside and basically the machines are intact, etc., we don't know, or they were removed beforehand, Iranians will at least pretend that is the case, whether that is the case or not. And if they don't say that there's been major destruction, Iranian public opinion doesn't compel them to go after the Americans. So I think there'll be some dissimulation going at the moment. And it'll be Iran, I think, will act with cunning and dissimulation. And they may have Israel exactly where they want it.
Right. I'll just ask one last question. Israel launched an unprovoked attack on Iran on June 13th. Then the US has launched an attack on Iran. It's an illegal attack. It breaks every international law. It violates sovereignty, territorial integrity, the United Nations Charter. So where in all this do we see the international order? Is there an international order? Is there a rules-based order, as we have called it for so long? The Security Council held a meeting last night, and the International Atomic Energy Agency is going to hold a board meeting, and India is on the board this week. What can they do?
I think the international order was finished the day Trump was sworn in on January the 20th. It was very clear. He came in saying that he's going to disrupt trade. He's going to have America first. You see, international order post-Second World War depended on American leadership. It depended on American support to an international order. But if it's going to be America first, and you can see that if he just walks out of a G7 meeting, he doesn't even meet any other leader there. The other invitees, the Brazilian president, the Mexican president, with whom he has an outstanding issue, the Indian prime minister, the Ukrainian president, if he just ignores all of them and walks back home simply to pay attention to the fight between Israel and Iran, you can see where his priorities lie. And on a daily basis, we are hearing this, that it's really completely self-centered. Advisors are playing a minimal role. God knows who is giving him advice on what, or whether he's listening at all. So the international order already stands disrupted. And that is what Germany, etc., are saying, that Europe will have to look after themselves. There's a new order which is emerging. Canadian Prime Minister is just going to Europe to sign a defense deal. So if the old connection between even Canada and US is gone, and Canada is looking for a new defense structure in which it will participate, which is NATO minus the US, literally, or most of NATO minus the US, then we are looking at a new world order. And I think India will also have to rethink, because we put too much in the US corner. And this game of both playing along with the US and as well as the other countries will become more and more difficult. As long as this war goes on, as long as the divisions exacerbate between China, Russia, Iran on one side, and US and Israel on the other, not even all of Europe. Although the German Chancellor did come up with a surprising statement, Israel is doing a dirty work. So, which meant even Europeans were indirectly behind, but not the French president. But you find some of the European leaders were behind Israel that go and destroy this nuclear thing. But they'll all back off if they realize that actually it's been counterproductive.
Right. So just one last question, one final question. You spoke about how India will have to find its own, will have to make its own arrangements in the world. And what's coming up now is two important engagements are coming up. One is the Quad foreign ministers meeting in Washington, to which Mr. Jaishankar will go, obviously. And the other is in Brazil, where the BRICS leaders will be meeting, the leaders of the BRICS countries, that is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And I think Mr. Modi will be traveling there as well. We saw how India disassociated itself from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Association on the Israel-Iran conflict as it was before the US joined it. What do you expect India to do at this summit? Because there'll definitely be discussions on the conflict in the West Asian region. How do you see India participating in those discussions?
I would find it difficult to imagine Prime Minister Modi going if by then this is not settled, or there's at least a ceasefire, and it ceases being an active issue. As it is, Trump is targeting BRICS, because BRICS is no longer what it was. Originally, it was just Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And then South Africa came in, and then lots of other countries have come in, including Iran. So, how are you? And Trump has targeted BRICS and saying, if they attack the US dollar, Chinese and the Russians will push that issue. So that's the point I'm making, that many of these groups were contradictory. The minute they became large, they became like mini NAM and balancing the US influence. Now, if you're with the US and there's somebody like President Trump there, who immediately gets upset if anything contradictory to US interests is perceived by him. It's not a normal president. Presidents in the past have put up with it. They've allowed India to play this game. But with Trump, it'll be more and more difficult. So let's see how it shapes up.
Ambassador Singh, thank you so much for this conversation and for your insights and your sharing your deep knowledge about Iran. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.